Welcome back to the Drive Home Reviews podcast, where I review the movies that I have just seen as I am driving home from the theater. And does anybody else get the feeling that Steven Spielberg just didn't like the movie Independence Day? I really get that feeling. His War of the Worlds felt like a rebuttal to Independence Day, especially since the aliens in that film deviated from the way aliens have been portrayed in almost every other Spielberg alien movie, with the exception of E.T., and they had the big fins in the back of their heads, a lot like the ones from Independence Day. And now we have Disclosure Day, which the title itself sounds like a sci-fi original movie ripping off Independence Day, and even the text on the poster and everything is vaguely reminiscent of the Independence Day font. Now, again, these could just be coincidences, but I get this feeling that Spielberg has just had a bug up his ass about how successful Independence Day was. And in a way, I can understand that, because it's a direct opposition to Spielberg's take on extraterrestrial life and the first meetings thereof. Spielberg, with War of the Worlds being the only real exception that I can think of, has always taken a much more hopeful view on the hopeful inevitability of us meeting life from other planets. His aliens have always been more human-friendly than those of many of his contemporaries, and even those who would come after him. You know, E.T., the Close Encounters of the Third Kind aliens, even the ones in that god-awful Indiana Jones film. These aliens were all much more benevolent and hopeful. So I can understand why he would kind of disagree so vehemently with the more violent, malevolent aliens as portrayed in Independence Day and in so much other media. So anyway, that's a very clumsy segue to bring us into the main topic of conversation today, Disclosure Day. Now, right off the bat, I'm going to let you know that I don't give a shit about spoiler warnings for this movie, because there's really nothing to spoil. Everything that this movie is right there in the trailers. You know, their aliens are real. The government has been covering them up, but a group of people are working to expose all the information about alien life to the entire world, because the people have a right to know. It's essentially a more drawn out, and I'm sorry to say, a more boring example of one of the mythology episodes of the X-Files. There's a lot I want to get into about this, but I want to start out with what's good about this movie, because I fear what I have to break apart is going to take much more time. So I want to preference it by saying that there are some good things about this movie. First of all, it is a Spielberg movie, and so therefore it is beautifully made. Like, Spielberg, there's a reason Spielberg's a legend. All right, there's a reason why he's one of the best to ever do it. Okay, so even the worst Spielberg movie is still just crammed with brilliant cinematography, sweeping shots, really well composed moments. Of course, John Williams supplies the score. So yeah, this is a textbook on great filmmaking. You can't deny the man is one of the all-time greats. So yeah, very, very beautifully made movie. And I went and saw this with a buddy of mine who I work with, and he goes to the movies with me a lot, and both of us agree that the ending is really, really well done, and to the point where, yeah, it almost makes it feel like the 2 hours leading up to it were all worth it. It is a really well done and edited and filmed and everything, and it's a moment that has made up a lot of the trademark Spielberg people looking, which I can't demonstrate for you here because, obviously this is radio, not TV. So, but if you've seen a Spielberg movie, you know what I'm talking about. Just think back to Jurassic Park and how many shots there are of people just reacting. So there's a lot of that. But it's edited together so well. It's scored beautifully. So the ending of this movie is really, really worth it. I will say that. But then we have to talk about the rest of the movie. Because it pains me to say this, but I fear that this movie is too much a victim of old school filmmaking techniques that worked in other properties, especially from this specific director, but they don't work here. Or rather, I think a more accurate statement is that they work against the film here. It's not that they don't work, it's that they go against the higher ideas that this movie is trying to deal in. This is one of those movies that thinks it's a lot more profound than it actually is. This movie wants to believe, and really does, that it is making some earth-shattering statements. It's got some big ideas, and it kind of does, but they are presented in such a way that they take what should be a complex narrative and break it down into simplistic good guy, bad guy film language. So, yeah. So before we move on, I think we have to take a second. Gotta go on a little side rant here.
Now, I don't want to get off on a rant here, but...
And we need to talk a little bit about visual language, or cinematic shorthand. These are terms I've used a lot in my reviews. I use them in my own directing, and they are very, very helpful. So, just for clarity's sake, cinematic shorthand, visual language, what this refers to are visual cues that an audience doesn't need to be instructed as to what these cues mean. We just automatically know them. Okay? This is a tradition dating all the way back to, the Commedia dell'arte, street performances in Italy, where the characters would wear specific costumes so the audience could always identify them. And it's very, very useful in film. Probably one of the best examples, if you go back to the Disney's Hercules movie, the scene where Hercules goes to the temple of Zeus, when he starts to pray, he drops to his knees. Now, that is not what Greeks would have done. back then. If you were going to the Temple of Zeus, you probably would have brought some kind of animal sacrifice. But we have been trained that the symbol of someone dropping to their knees is a symbol of piety. All right? So that's cinematic shorthand. Another example, more in keeping with what we're seeing here. Again, my buddy Eric, who saw this movie with me, he is a media expert. That's what his field of study is. That's what he teaches. And we were talking about this on the way back, and he was saying that one of the things he had the hardest time believing is that the goal of our heroes in this film is to get all of this information onto TV, to get it onto a local news station, right? And he makes the correct assumption that in this day and age, very few people get their news from TV. Very few people get their news from local news stations. We get it from online articles and whatnot. You know, that is where the predominance of news comes from, and he's right. But cinematic shorthand has trained us as an audience that in a movie we equate TV news with true news, with fact. Not saying that we do in real life, saying that when we're watching a movie, television news is treated as a source of legitimate information. This has been going on. Think of all the movies you've seen where exposition is being delivered to the audience via the news, the TV news. Okay? Even in situations, okay, great, another great example. Think of it this way. Die Hard. All right? Everybody's seen Die Hard. That's one we can all get to. Thornburg, despite his motives and despite the end consequences, when he broadcasts the interview with Holly and John McClane's children, you know, this thing that clues Hans Gruber into what Holly's actual relationship with McClane is. Yes, it has disastrous consequences, and he goes about it the wrong way, and he's all self-serving, but the information that he is providing is true. Okay? So, even in that situation, we are trained as an audience to associate TV news with truth, whereas in movies, things like podcasts, blogs, these characters are always seen more as on the fringe, as conspiracy theorists, you know, things of that nature. The movie media doesn't trust those outlets of information yet. All right? So this is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about visual shorthand. And Spielberg has famously made great use of visual shorthand. He is one of the masters of it. You know, think back, Indiana Jones, that silhouette. He trained us almost from the film's publicity to recognize that silhouette, that hat, that is the symbol of our hero. Okay? Or probably one of his best examples, look at Jurassic Park. The characters in there are very B-movie type characters. And they're all color-coded for our convenience. Grant is in blue. Ellie is in pink. Malcolm is in black. Hammond is in white. Tim is dressed basically as a mini Grant. Lex is in purple. Okay? The only person who does not have a signature color is Nedry, who is wearing a very loud patterned Hawaiian shirt, which signifies that he is separate from the rest of the cast. Now, interestingly enough, this is how deep you can go with costume design and shit. The only other character who has patterns on their shirt is Lex. So yes, she is wearing predominantly purple. From a distance, you can identify her, but when they do close-ups, you can see her tank top has kind of floral patterns on it. Why is this? Because she's also the computer kid. So it makes that link in the audience's mind. Even if you don't recognize it, your subconscious is picking up on these visuals. Okay? And again, I want to stress, cinematic shorthand, visual shorthand, it is not bad. It is very good. It is beneficial. Okay? That's why everybody fucking uses it. It's a visual medium. Here is the problem with it. Yes, it delivers information quickly and without feeling the need to explain certain things to the audience. But, and that works out fine in a movie like Jurassic Park, where it's a very straightforward film. But in a movie like this, which is constantly trying to convince you that it is about so much more, relying on that visual shorthand and then never actually breaking free of it makes your movie simplistic. And this movie, in terms of its characters, in terms of the way its story is told, is incredibly simplistic. To a fault. Okay? And again, you see this in the way the characters are visualized. So our bad guys, of course, are tech people and are wearing all black. They're driving all black cars, you know. Whereas, you know, our main baddie, our main antagonist is, of course, played by Colin Firth, a British man dressed all in black. And the people that the movie believes are in the right, the people who want to disclose all of this information to the public, of course, the leader of that is a black man with a very reassuring, deep voice, dressed in tweed, you know, like you would associate with any knowledgeable college professor, as films for years have, you know, this is what the League of Magical Negroes movie was about. You know, that's a trained character that we are programmed to see and believe. So, yeah, it makes these things very simplistic, but it never grows beyond it. What you have, what the main thrust of this movie is, you have our two characters, and I cannot remember the characters' names. That's how kind of dull they are. One is played by Emily Blunt, and the other is by some guy I don't recognize, so I'm just going to call him Charlie Jug-Ears. That's mean, but it's all I can think of, really. So Emily Blunt and Charlie Jug-Ears are these two people kind of being pulled in between these two forces. The one, the Colin Firth, the British guy dressed in black, again, visual shorthand, who's telling us, no, don't disclose this information to the world. And the other one saying, yes, we need to. And it couldn't be clearer where the movie wants us to go. Is that a bad thing? Yeah. In this instance, I think it is, because this is a complicated issue. One of the other problems this movie has is trying to discern what it's actually about. Okay? Do we take this as a one-to-one narrative, as this is just about the existence of extraterrestrials? You can, but I don't think it is, because Spielberg doesn't do that. Okay? The aliens in his movies always represent something else. I think the closest thing that we can take is that this is a movie about the divine. How we would interpret the divine and who has ownership of the divine. Whatever you may classify that as. And this is again told through the visual shorthand. There's a lot of heavenly light coming through windows. Our resistance leader is, he basically is a religious zealot. When you break it down, and it's, basically refers to these aliens as gods, and how their power is empathy, and they believe that our ability to be empathetic is our greatest evolutionary, gift, and he's just, this is so great. And the other guy, Colin Firth, is saying, we don't know what this really is. We don't know what the impact of this is going to be. We need to keep this under wraps. And, essentially is, I think, supposed to represent people who believe themselves to be holy and pious and religious, but in fact are just using it for their own selfish gain. I think that's what this is trying to go for. I think there's also a metaphor in there about, of course, government transparency and the greater need for it, the need for more information. And I think after pondering it for a little while, I think that's what this movie is going for. And when viewed through that light, it does make a lot more sense. Even in there's visual evidence of this throughout. The alien abduction scenes are not the kind of fire in the sky, X-Files visions that we've been given for years. These are much more calming, much more gentle. There's a whole, that God touching man's finger thing from the Sistine Chapel imagery going on with holding of hands. The same thing he did with E.T. and the touching of fingers. He's very big on that. So I think that is supposed to be what this movie is actually going for. And in viewed in that light, that does make me think it was a bit more successful than I did when I first watched it. Do I still think the movie was successful? No, I don't. Because again, I think that something that has such bombacity about its own importance really doesn't give any of its higher ideas much airtime. Okay? Another piece of evidence that this is actually supposed to be about the divine. One thing I never liked. Okay, so I am an X-Files fan from way back. Like, I watched it as it premiered. Like, it was the ultimate water cooler show when I was in high school. You had to make sure you watched the X-Files the night it aired so you could talk about it the next day in the lunchroom. And this is back before the internet and all that. So if you missed it, you fucking missed it. Right? And as a kid, you really do get behind the Fox Mulder. Yeah, let's go. Let's expose the baddies. Yay, yo, yay. Until you grow up and realize, hey, Fox Mulder, his motivation was nothing as pure as the people have a right to know. It was revenge. And he never seemed to give much thought to what the consequences of his actions would be. What would be the consequences of us learning of alien life? If today flying saucers just appeared just out of nowhere, what would that knowledge do to us? Even though they didn't do anything, if it just showed up, hung around for a while, then flew away. What would that do? And everybody has this brilliant, this wonderful thought of, it'll unite humanity, and we'll all hold hands and sing torch songs. That's one of the whole basis behind, the Star Trek mythology with First Contact. The difference is, in First Contact, the Vulcans arrive after the world has gone to shit. After a third world war where, most of the population is dead. We're at our lowest and are then able to unite under higher ideals. I'm talking about if this happened right now. And let me tell you, folks, I don't care what you might think or what, I'm sorry, this is one thing nobody can convince me otherwise of. If aliens, or if something divine came down and proved itself to us right this second, insurmountable, undeniable, hoax-proof proof, it would not unite humanity in this beautiful, Coke commercial of everyone wanting to teach the world to sing. I guarantee you, aliens land, and they could look like the goddamn Care Bears and bring us cures for all diseases, bring us, technology to enhance our lives, not a malicious or conniving bone in their alien bodies. And I guarantee you, every government on this planet, probably led by ours, and the Orange Hobgoblin in charge, would be thinking of some way to fuck them over.
I bring you love.
It's bringing love. Don't let it get away.
Break its legs.
And I do appreciate, that's one of the things I do appreciate about this movie, is that it does kind of bring up for a brief second, what are the consequences of this information getting out? And the only argument brought up is it'll make people doubt their religion. That's literally the only thing you think this is going to have, the only fallout from this, honestly. Again, it's visual shorthand, but it flies in the face of the bigger ideas. Okay? I wanted this movie to take more ownership of its ideas and the actual take on the responsibility of exploring them. That is what I wanted. And it felt like it was happy just bringing them up, saying, yes, we have big ideas, but then not really going into them. Okay? You want to talk about what happens if people find out that aliens are real. Okay, yes, religion is going to be one of those conversations, but it's not the only conversation, even if it is your main thrust of this movie. There are other implications, same as there would be if something divine showed up. Okay, it would have long-reaching consequences and fallout. Okay? I don't care, there are songs about this. Would Jesus wear a Rolex? What if God was one of us? That whole thing. So yeah, it brings up these ideas, but doesn't actually do much with them. Now, I'm sure some people may argue that, well, it's in service of its overarching idea, but it never gets past the simplistic view of it. This side is right, this side is wrong. And I think that's one of its biggest flaws. Okay, I'll play script doctor. Do you know how to fix this? How to make this a more interesting movie that lives up to the ideas that it puts forth?
Fix it, fix it, fix it, fix it, fix it, fix it. Fix it, fix it, fix it!
So, as stated, the movie has two older people trying to convince two younger people to go with their way of thinking. That you have Colin Firth saying, no, don't do it, and you have Hugo, that's the character's name, on the other side saying, yes, we have to do this. And again, in the movie, it's brought up very clearly, Colin Firth is only interested in money. You just did this for money and power and blah, 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 because, of course, other shorthand, capitalism and corporations are bad. All right? So what if, instead of that, what if you had a film where Colin Firth's character actually had legitimate concerns that actually put forward, hey, we're not just keeping this all under wraps for fun. I'm not the cigarette smoking man or Snidely Whiplash twirling my mustache at night thinking about, mwahaha, I have all the knowledge and people will never know. That there are legitimate concerns to information like this getting out and being readily available. It's shameful in a way that Men in Black handled this in a much more eloquent way than a Steven Spielberg movie. What is it that Tommy Lee Jones says on this very topic?
Well, why the big secret? People are smart. They can handle it.
A person is smart. People are dumb, panicky, dangerous animals, and you know it.
So this would not only be dangerous to us as a society, but this information getting out could be, incredibly harmful to the beings themselves. So what if he actually had reasoned arguments, and Hugo has his reasoned arguments, and now these two young people, i.e. the younger generation, have two venerable, logical people, both with ideals and points that seem to make sense, telling them, hey, we need to go this way or we need to go that way. And now these two young people have to make the decision. And if the decision that they make is people need to decide for themselves, and they can only do that if they're informed and they have all the information, then there you go. There is a much more interesting character study. There is a much larger idea, and it creates actual characters. And I think that is another one of the biggest flaws of this movie. There are no actual characters. Again, I can't remember anybody's character name in this. I take that back. I tell a lie. Emily Blunt's name was Fairchild. Very on the nose, right? And Hugo, yes, Hugo. I had to struggle for that, but yeah. And they shout each other's names hundreds of times. Can't remember them because the characters are bland. Charlie McJuggears is an incredibly bland character. Emily Blunt's character is incredibly bland. We've seen that. She's like, she's every sitcom woman in the last 10 years. I don't know why, but she kept making me think of the Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt. In her interactions and her dialogue there. Yeah, the characters are very one note and very rarely grow beyond it. They're given their one character trait, their one source in the film, and that's all they are. So again, visual shorthand is not a bad thing, but if your characters never grow past it, if you don't do something with that instantaneous information you've provided the audience, you can circumvent or you can deconstruct the characters or their belief systems, then all you have are a bunch of one-dimensional characters doing very one-dimensional things. Another problem I had with this movie is that, yeah, it takes way too much time with its action sequences. I would rather it cut out its action sequences and put in some more scenes of these characters actually talking, and not just about the information that needs to be provided to move the plot the next step, but actually talking about what it is they're doing and why they're doing it, what their motivations are. Again, this movie would actually have lived up to its pompous belief that it's this big think piece. Some might ask, does it have the obligation to live up to that? Can it just be an action film about disclosing alien life? Yeah, I guess it could. But, again, if there's no twist, if there's no turn, if you're not doing anything with the alien themselves, and the whole thing is about exposing the cover-up, well, there has been hundreds of films and TV shows like that. So you better have something more to say about the topic to make yours stand out. And it really doesn't. It doesn't have any of that. Not to mention, okay, this film also suffers from a severe tonal problem in certain areas. I gotta say, this is kind of branching off of that. This is something else that bugs me about this movie and its need for action scenes. The henchmen in this movie are the worst fucking henchmen, the worst foot soldiers. Did Colin Firth get them directly out of henchman college?
You, like so many others, are drawn to the sexy, action-packed lifestyle of the professional henchman.
But I could never be a henchman. I am just a normal guy who is between the age of 18 and 30, a loner, and lacks ties to friends and family.
You, stranger, are the perfect candidate for costumed aggression.
Because these idiots, can't hear two people clomping around the woods, stomping in dry grass, making all sorts of noise, sneaking up on them and stealing their cars. They can't quite, catch those folks. There's a scene in this where Emily Blunt is using the Deus Ex Machina alien device, the thing that Hugo tells her it's not a magic wand, and yet it seems to work a lot like a magic wand, to turn the hiding place of the truth seekers invisible, and the bad guys can't see them. And Colin Firth tells the soldiers, go in there. They're in there. Go get them. And the first couple run towards it, and they slam into the building, and they break through the glass, and one of them falls through the door like he's one of the three fucking Stooges. All right. Then the next wave comes. Now, a thinking person would see your colleagues running towards something, slamming into something invisible, and say, okay, somehow they have made things invisible. So I would assume that the next group who saw this happen would approach with some form of caution, feeling out, putting their hands out, saying, okay, what's right in front of me? Nope, the next group does the same thing. Ha! Bump! And down they go. Worst henchmen ever. And again, blurred the lines between, is this scene supposed to be funny? Because it doesn't seem like it's supposed to be funny, but what I'm seeing is fucking hilarious. So, yeah. Also, okay, this is such a mean nitpick. This is a thing that only bothers me. Okay? I do not count this as problems with the actual film because, again, a visual shorthand. I know why they did it, but it's more of a thing of, okay, so the movie opens at a wrestling match, right? First thing I notice is that one of the wrestlers is Lance Archer from AEW. Turns out the other wrestler is Brian Cage, also of AEW. So yeah, AEW representing. All right, so they're having a wrestling match, and they are there because our hero, Charlie McJuggears, is there to make a swap for the information he stole to save his kidnapped girlfriend. And the guy from the government is sitting behind him and tells him the next time everybody stands up, slip the backpack you're wearing off. All right? Okay, great. And the people are watching this match, and they're standing up and cheering at the most pedestrian fucking moves you've ever. Yeah, he whipped him to the corner. Hooray! Everybody stands up, and and they do this stuff like, yay, a head scissor! Hooray! It's like, this is a basic moveset, guys. There's nothing, wrestling fans they're not like Pavlov's dogs. Every time something happens in the ring, we stand up. That's not how that works. You stand up when something really exciting happens, or when someone's about to hit their finishing move, or something like that. The whip to the corner is nobody's finishing move, like, at all. But again, using the visual shorthand, not a bad thing, because it's a sporting event, something where we know people stand up and yell a lot, very interactive. I get why they did it, but it is one of those things that just bugged me as an audience member, as a wrestling fan, going, who is standing up at, yay, he ran across the ring, woohoo! So yeah, that's just a me nitpick. Okay, I should wrap this up, because I don't know what else there is to say about this movie, except to say that I think it's disappointing. I don't think it's bad. And now that I think I have a track on what it's actually about, I think I appreciate it a little bit more than when I was first seeing it. Now that I firmly believe that it is about the exposure of the divine, and how we would accept that, and the people who want it for the world for the right reasons, and want to share the teachings, and those who want to hoard it for their own personal gain. Okay, I get that. And I do think it makes the film hang together better than what I initially thought.
The nothing someone says before the word but really counts.
But
It does not change the fact that it is a shockingly simplistic movie that has aspirations of being a real thought piece, like The Arrival. And you can't deny Spielberg's genius in filmmaking, but his tendency towards stock characters, visual shorthand, it works against him here. It undercuts the more interesting, character-driven movie that we were kind of promised, that this movie thinks that it is. And I think it's just, in this day and age, I think it may be a little too simplistic. I'm not saying that the ending is bad or the conclusion that the characters come to in terms of disclosing the information is the wrong decision, but I wanted to see more of a journey getting there. You know? I wanted to show that this is not a black and white topic, and that it has to be thought about, and nobody really does. Their answer to it is all, oh, people will get over it. It's like, no, they don't. There's a line in this. One of the characters, Charlie McJuggears' girlfriend, is a girl who wanted to be a nun but didn't make it all the way through, and that provides us with another religious point of view on the goings-on. And she's talking to the Mother Superior there on the phone, and the Mother Superior tells her, you didn't lose your faith in God, you lost your faith in people. It's like, yeah, because she's paid attention. People are the fucking worst, okay? You know, we can't share this planet with each other. You think we can share it with anything else? So, again, not saying that the film is wrong-headed, not saying that its message isn't one to be taken seriously. I'm saying that it's a much weightier issue, And this film just wants to be the simplistic good guy, bad guy, black and white dynamic. And I think that hurts it. And we know Spielberg can do better. We really do. So that's my opinion. I don't know. And I kind of feel like I don't know if I was as clear in my dissection of this film as I was hoping to be. So if it wasn't, then again, my response, as always, is go watch it for yourself and make your own decision. But for me, I thought it was well-made, fairly decent film, great ending, but it felt so one-dimensional the rest of the time. So yeah, that's my final take. So final grade for Disclosure Day, I have to go a C- on it. I really do. And I don't know, maybe if I watch it again, maybe I'll think differently. But the thing is, I don't know if there's anything in this that makes me want to watch it again. So smarter film critics than I may be able to finally break down this movie in satisfying ways in the years to come. But for me, it was just kind of a disappointing outing. So yeah, there it is. Okay, so there you have it. So thanks for coming along. Again, these last couple reviews I don't feel have been my best, so I'm sorry about that. But I hope you've gotten something out of them. I hope you've enjoyed them. We will be back, and we'll see you later on. And as always, drive safe, and we'll see you at the movies.
But somewhere out there, something is watching us. There are alien forces acting in ways we can't perceive. Are we alone in the universe? Impossible. When you consider the wonders that exist all around us. Voodoo priests of Haiti, the Tibetan numerologists of Appalachia, the unsolved mysteries of unsolved mysteries. The truth is out there.